So today we have Maestro Marshall McDonald here, eminent saxophone player and clarinet player, right? All around woodwind player, a former player in the Count Basie Orchestra. Worked with Lionel Hampton and a bunch of greats. So we're just honored to have you and to have you share your wisdom today. And thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. So talk about a little bit how did you get into music and your journey to the saxophone and the clarinet and so on and so forth.
Well, as all young people, they take you to band class, and I wanted to play an instrument. And for some reason, I wanted to play the oboe. I don't know why. My brother had already become actually an excellent trumpet player, and my sister played violin and piano, and everyone played piano. And my father played piano, my mother played piano. Uh, Fortunately, one wise person told my father, if your son learns to play clarinet, then he'll be able to learn all of the other reed instruments. It'd be better for him to start on clarinet. And that's how that happened. So I started on clarinet.
Mm, great. And you were studying with the principal of the Pittsburgh Symphony, right? Out in
That's right.
Pittsburgh.
My father had taken my brother had been studying at Carnegie Mellon before that time. My father-in-law, actually, my godfather was the head of Carnegie Mellon University. That was one of the reasons why we moved out to the suburbs. He had some contacts with people. And it was 1965. It was a little difficult for black people to move to those neighborhoods, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And we were
Yeah.
actually the first family there in Fox Chapel, Pennsylvania. So he got me lessons to Carnegie Mellon, and the first lessons were the rhythmic lessons where you do like different just rhythms and music and that kind of thing. And then finally I started clarinet lessons with Thomas Thompson, who was the principal of the Pittsburgh Symphony.
Yeah. Great orchestra. And so what happens after high school? Did you go to music school or did you go straight into the profession?
Well, after high school, I did follow what my father wanted me to do. And at first, I was a biology chemistry major at Lafayette College. In high school, I played in the concert bands, and I added saxophone around ninth grade. I told my father I wanted to play saxophone because I wanted to play in the stage band, and he wasn't too happy about the saxophone, but he bought me a saxophone. So I basically just taught myself the saxophone because the person was right. Once you played clarinet, I just got a book. And the fingerings were so similar, and the embouchure was similar and everything. I just taught myself the saxophone and joined the stage band in, I think, 10th grade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and clarinet's forgive me if I'm wrong, but it's maybe a little bit harder to play in tune, that kind of thing, right? Than
Yeah, the,
saxophone
the
is.
clarinet takes so much discipline with your embouchure and your breath, and you can't move your fingers off, the tone holes you have to cover properly. So usually if you learn
Mm-hmm.
clarinet, you can really move around to the other reeds. The guy who said that was right.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
I
so
started
so
off
you
at
oh yeah, go ahead.
I started off at being a bio major, but I still was playing the saxophone at college and the jazz band. And I wanted to learn more about music, so I heard Mark Kirk play at a clinic, and he was studying with Phil Woods, and the band director gave me permission to go up. He gave me a school van to drive up and study with Mark Kirk, and that actually was some of my first jazz lessons, to tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm. And then how do you get into the profession? How do you start getting gigs and that kind of thing?
Ah, that's interesting. But for the longest time, I was basically just studying in college. When I went back to Pittsburgh, I transferred to Pittsburgh, the University of Pittsburgh. My father was teaching there, and I was studying with Dr. Nathan Davis, and then I became kind of a jazz major. But they didn't really have at the time, but studying jazz, and I just started practicing my scales, and I had got the Patterns for Jazz book. Mark Kirk had given me a Phil Woods exercise where it was a minor, diminished scale, a major scale, and a half diminished scale. And he told me the funny story about Mark Kirk was I had all these Abersold books. You remember all the jazz books everyone has. And I brought them to his house, and he looked at them and he threw them on the ground. And he said, "These are all useless. Don't bring them back to my house again." So what he meant was I needed to learn the music in my mind and understand what the numbers and the chords were. So he wrote out this exercise, and honestly, I'll tell you, Nick, when I finally went back to Pittsburgh, I tried to learn this thing in all 12 keys, and it took some time. So I invented a method of playing the note and saying the note out loud and then saying the number. So I would play the D and go D1, and then go E2, and then F3, and I continued that about 6 hours a day through all 12 keys to memorize these four different scales that he had given me. And it worked. It just took a lot of time.
Does that build perfect pitch into your head, or is it more relative pitch?
I think it builds relative pitch. I don't have perfect pitch, but I think I have
Okay.
relative pitch. There were some guys in Basie band that had perfect pitch. Was just it was just incredible to me. We'd be walking along and they'd hear some music and go, "Hey man, what about that F in the bass?" So, I guess it's good, bro. You know,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, it's remarkable. But does
it,
that particular exercise give you relationships in terms of which scale steps mean a certain thing, meaning the tonic feels a certain way, the dominant feels a certain way, the subdominant feels a certain way, in terms of feel and that kind of thing?
No, what it did is it taught me the language. What Mark told me that I needed to learn the language, the numerical numbers of language. And
Okay.
another professor pointed out that if you look at Mozart and Bach and Beethoven, they all were using numbers to write and to compose. And they were explaining to me it's not really notes. We have to assign a number to it. And so, in other words, if you need to know what the fifth is right away, you need to know it's 5A or B flat, 5B, B, that F. And it was the numerical system that they wanted me to learn and to memorize the scales so I could play them up and down in all different intervals.
Hmm. So you played a lot of scales, you did a lot of singing in your head, basically, and singing out loud and saying the notes. And then, how much practicing were you doing to master the tech, or maybe master is not the quite the right word because I don't know if we ever master our instruments, but
Right.
to get the technique under your fingers, how long does that take, and how much practicing were you doing
I
before
was
you entered the profession?
I was doing about 6 to 8 hours a day in the practice room at Pitt and sometimes at home. And
Hmm.
it took a long time. I'm still practicing maybe 2 to 4 hours a day right now. I believe practice and consistent and good practice is the only way to really learn music personally. Whether I was learning the Mozart Clarinet Concerto or Von Weber Concerto or studying the Close studies on saxophone or jazz, for me it's hours of practice and repetition and building that into your mind. And then of course you have to use your muscles to play the notes and the patterns. And it's time, I think, time.
Yeah, and the woodshedding never ends, right? And the development never ends. So what kind of things are you working on now in terms of maintaining your technique and building new technique? What are you working on for those 2 to 4 hours?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. Um, I have a Jamie Abersol jazz streaming, so I use that some days where I will play along. But most of the time, I like playing along with the not the tune, not the songs, but the books that have the exercises, like the 251 book or there's one book I said getting it together or something like that, where they'll play the raise four chords or something, and you have to play along through the cycle. I use those books. Yesterday, I wanted to go back and review Take Five because I had a student who wanted to learn it, and he has been learning it he's not a professional musician. He's been learning it for months, and so I pulled up. I play along is what I do a lot of the time. I pulled up Paul Desmond on a live version of Take Five, and I played along with Paul, and you kind of pick off the licks as you go and play with Paul Desmond.
Hmm. So you play with a lot of recordings, and do you practice scales still?
Yes, I do. I was I was practicing scales and patterns again yesterday, just to try to keep my fingers active. I haven't been working as much as I was in the younger years, and so we all have to sit there and run those scales or those patterns. I posted one on Instagram about a triadic pattern that I was running in minor thirds, and I've been working on that again. I kind of pulled it off a Michael Brecker lick off of Pools. I altered it slightly from what he actually played, and I made a symmetrical pattern. And what I do is it was Michael Brecker who told me to keep a notebook and to write everything in the notebook, and you practice that way.
Mm. Oh, you mean write solos or write ideas or licks or whatever?
Yes, I met him on the road, and he was one of my idols, which is a funny story. When I told Dr. Nathan Davis at Pitt how much I liked Michael Brecker, he was slightly offended, because he was like, "Oh, Michael Brecker," so because at that time in 1979 or something, you know, a lot of people considered Michael Brecker more of a funk pop, you know what I mean, type player.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, I know Michael Brecker." He called him my hero, teasing me about it, because I was so fascinated with his what's the word we're looking for? His speed, his the way he could play so quickly like that. So someone offered me a gig actually to play "Don't Let Me Be Lonely Tonight," my first job, and there's a Michael Brecker solo on it, and it was a friend of my brother's, and he said, "But you have to learn this solo to come do our gig." So I had alto at the time, so I actually learned the whole solo off of the. It was a record then, remember that, or a cassette tape.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I learned the whole solo, and then I went to my little first professional job, and I played it, and he said, good job, you did it." So that was one of the first times I pulled off a solo off of a tape like that.
Mm. And when you're practicing these scales and these exercises, how do you keep it interesting? I mean, you're sitting down for hours a day and there's just a ton of repetition. You did it today, you did it yesterday, the day before. How do you keep these exercises interesting? We're so distracted
Right.
nowadays. And, how does that work?
Well, I posted something where at one time I used to actually watch TV while doing these what I call manual labor, and I know a lot of musicians who do that. So when I was doing the manual labor of just keeping my fingers active, I would watch the TV show or the news or something like that.
Hmm.
Nowadays I actually have it. You probably see the TV back here. I keep the TV on sometimes here. I like to practice, and I've always liked to practice. It feels nice to practice, so I just kind of push my way through it and realize it's helpful and fun. It's fun, really, when you find a way to do it.
Yeah, so the TV helps you get through it. Is there something about the TV too where it kind of helps you get you out of your head and make it more automatic? Does is there a
Exactly.
bit of yeah.
Right.
So your fingers are just moving without thinking about it? Yeah.
That's it, because it really music is a separate part of the brain, and we were talking about the oral concept of music, and I learned once that when I read a piece of music, and then when I learned Charlie Parker's solo off of the tape, it felt much different to me learning it myself than reading the Charlie Parker Omni book, and it seemed like it stuck with me and I understood it. And then I had a psychiatrist years tell me, Dr. Nelson Harrison in Pittsburgh said that music is in a different part of the brain than the logic brain. And while we're reading music, that's kind of the logic scientific brain. While we're hearing music, that's another part of the brain. And he said that's why you're having this experience.
Wow, wow, wow. So you want to remove the logic part of your brain when you're practicing as much as because that's what you need when you perform, right? You don't want to be thinking too much about every single, yeah.
I think that's what Charlie Parker meant when he said practice all this and learn all this, then forget it and play.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know.
And and do you practice slowly? Is that a thing on us? Because you have this incredibly fast technique, but do you spend time working it slowly to build it up, or?
Probably at one time when I was at Pitt, I did, but I always wanted to try to learn to play the tempos that I heard other people in Pittsburgh playing. So, no, I don't actually practice things slowly unless it's a part that I just can't play. My sight reading became very good from the clarinet studies, and that's always helped me be a lead alto player. I had a good sound, I played in tune, and I could read well. And I always liked playing lead alto. So because the lead alto is fun to me because the lead alto is the most important voice in a big band. It's what everyone hears all of the time. I mean, for instance, there's a story about my friend Mark Gross who was playing lead alto in the Lionel Hampton band, and he went to Lionel and he said, Gates was his nickname. They called everyone Gates. They called Lionel Hampton Gates because Louis Armstrong once said to Lionel, he said, "Man, you swinging like a gate. I'm going to call you Gates." So that's how he got the nickname. You swinging like a gate. So Mark
Uh-huh.
said to Lionel, "I want some more solos." And Lionel looked at him and said, "But Gates, you playing lead alto, you soloing all night long." So that was
Because
a
it cuts
lesson to
through.
me. It's true, because when I listen to all the Basie records now I recorded on, you always hear the lead alto. It's like the voice of the band.
Yeah, it's like the oboe part in an orchestra. It just kind of cuts through, right? Or the flute or the piccolo or something.
Right.
Yeah. And And so you spend a lot of time learning from records. So when you're learning from these records, you learn them at speed. You learn these solos at speed. You don't slow them down and then build them up. You just you learn them at speed in little chunks, maybe, or.
Yeah, that was the only option we had once was learn. You remember you could Charlie Parker had a turntable with 33 and 16 on it. So I read that he slowed some of them down to half speed to 16 or whatever speed that is. That was the two speeds he had: the normal speed, and then you could slow it down. Yeah, so I had a record player, so I either would, or in a cassette tape, I basically would learn them at the real speed. Until later, when the MP3s and everything came out, that changed everything.
Hmm. Yeah, because now we have YouTube and you can slow it down to point 0.5, 0.55, point 0.6, and so on and so forth, and it does it
Right,
automatically. But
right.
maybe there's something about that. If you have too many options, it's limiting in a way, right? Maybe you need less options.
Personally, I think there's too many options nowadays, and I was looking at some of your other interviews, and I noticed the biggest thing that was connecting all of them was they talked about how much practice time they put in and how they had to practice all of the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it seems to be the common denominator to even these rock musicians, right? They're practicing all the time. But us wind players, I think it's um, so and long tones. Do you do long tones?
I was doing some yesterday. I don't do them every day anymore. For the longest time, I was doing different exercises that the clarinet professor Nestor Kovo had given me, and he also had me play saxophone, which was simply just an octave, fifth octave. I would do overtones on the saxophone. That's very important to learn how to control the saxophone. So I do long tones, but honestly, not very often anymore because for some reason I've always had my sound and I've never really lost it. So.
Hmm. Yeah. So you mean long tones in terms of building your sound and everything. When you do long tones, though, how does that work? Do you just you hold the note out for an extended period of time? Do you play it over a drone or something like that, or just
Well,
hold
yesterday,
notes out?
yesterday I was actually doing the octave, fifth octave. Ooh, and I would go down chromatically like that. That was a big exercise that Nestor Koval had given me, and I found it very helpful. When I was younger, I used to do chromatic overtones. I would do whole tones on scales, but I find the 8-5-1 to be excellent for the saxophone because you can go all the way up and down the saxophone that way.
Hmm. And in terms of intonation, you have amazing intonation, and you blend well with these bands that you're playing with. How does that happen? Is that all in the head, or is it in the lips? Is it? But does it start in the head?
Maybe it starts in the head. For me, it was my teachers teaching me. To be honest with you, teaching me what I'm doing at the reed. I was having
Hmm.
some intonation trouble at one point, so I went to study with David Tafani, who was a student of Joe Allard, and I would drive to his house maybe once a month, and he gave me some techniques of what I'm doing at the reed, explaining to me about my throat and my tongue and my airstream and different overtone exercise to practice, which actually changed my life. By the time we recorded the Ray Sings Basie Swings record, which we did using an old Ray Charles track, and then we re-recorded the horn parts. I had really captured his method well, and you can hear it on that record. My intonation and my sound had changed at that particular point. It became very centered.
Mm. So it's finding the center of the note. What was the problem before? Was it just too much tightness and it was raising the pitch or something like that? Or
But basically, I was not supporting the reed, he said. I was not
uh,
pushing from the diaphragm enough and losing support on the reed, which he was correct. When you play clarinet, you can't do that. But see, you get on the saxophone and sometimes you try to play jazzy or something. When you stop the support. So we had various exercises, overtone exercises, and scales and patterns and things that really helped. It changed my life, to tell you the truth.
uh-huh. So good intonation is really just about finding the center of the note, meaning where the note resonates on your instrument.
I think
Is
it's
that
where it
kind of?
resonates on the instrument. And my brother told me it had to do with singing tones and hearing the tone. Um, it, 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 it I'll tell you a little story. I had a friend when I was we were hanging out, and one time I played saxophone. I had the saxophone out, and he said, "Hey, can you play the Gomer Pyle theme or something like that?" So I said, "Yeah, I think so." So just by ear, I just started playing the Gomer Pyle theme, and he said, "Oh, that's amazing! Can you play I Dream of Jeannie?" I said, "Yeah, I've heard it." So I found the notes of I Dream of Jeannie. What I learned was that we have a whole bunch of songs in our head that we've heard. Right, this is what my brother was trying to tell me, and if we just take the time and hourly try to play those songs, it's a great practice technique. It could be gospels at the church you've heard, hymnals, pop songs, a bread song you liked, Mission Impossible theme. It's amazing when you try to just play it on the instrument that you can actually accomplish that.
Yeah, and so just taking simple tunes and trying to play them on your instrument. Interesting. And are you hearing these notes in your head while you're playing in real time? Or is it
Hmm.
kind of how does that work?
I, I don't think I'm hearing the notes in my head. I don't know where they are, to tell you the truth. That's an interesting question. I just
Hmm.
seem to sense almost where the notes are supposed to go. And that's probably just from years of practice to know when I play from C to G it sounds like this, or C to F it sounds like that. I think it's all aural. I Some people have perfect pitch and can probably identify it that way, but I find it an aural sensation.
Hmm. And how do you decide when you're improving? How do you decide what note is going to come next? Are you hearing that note first, or is
Oh,
a lot of it just muscle memory type of a thing? Things that you played before, and they're
well,
coming out.
jazz is a combination of I studied with George Coleman for a while when I was in New York, and I actually saw George when I went back to New York in April, and we actually had a lesson to get together. He's still doing it, and he still
Fantastic.
he still stumped me a few times. For the first part of I'll tell you, the first part of the lesson is what you said. George George said, "I hear some good things about you, lad. You've come a long way since our lessons." And so he pulled out his tenor. He's 89 years old, so maybe 90. He pulled out his
Wow.
tenor and he started running me licks at me like, and they had me play it back, and I was starting to get most of it right. And he'd play another one, and I would play it back. And when he was done, I said, "Good job, young man. You've come a long way. That was excellent, Marshall. Your ears have developed so far since I first met you." And then he said, "Help me to the piano and I'll show you a few things here." And then he started playing some tunes on the piano with different bass notes and different, passing chords. And my ear was getting a little fatigued. I was starting to get stumped, but I recorded it all. I said, "Please record it so you can study it later." So it was
Hmm.
so basically, it's an aural. It has to become instantaneously aurally. Everything. You know.
Yeah. So you're it's like total fluidity between your head and then your instrument, right? Should be no obstruction between those two.
Basically, like when we talk, yeah. The biggest
Hmm.
difference between today and yesterday time would be that when I first got in the Basie band, there were a lot of the elders there. I was subbing. Frank Foster hired me. It was 1994, and a lot of the people who played with Count Basie were still in the band. You know, and
Yeah.
Bill Hughes told me, he said it's hard for this band to compete with what we were doing in 1958. He said we were working 300 nights a year. He said it
Mm.
got to the point where we were like a living organism, where the music, we didn't even really need the music at that point. You grow and you learn, and there's no way for anyone to reproduce that at this time.
Yeah, it's just the mind meld, right? It doesn't exist anymore, right? That kind of
No, no.
playing. Yeah, yeah. It's a shame. Um, and your vibrato, I noticed, is just very impressive. It's vocal. Did you have to develop that, or is that just something natural that you just put into your sound and you don't have to really think about it too much?
Oh, I practice that a lot by going slowly, like ooh, and then try it faster, ooh, and then I would try to develop it. And the second thing that I did was, of course, which I keep posting on Instagram, is the best way to learn jazz is basically to listen to jazz and try to copy somebody you like, whether it's Kenny G or David Sanborn. And by the way, David Sanborn was one of my most favorite saxophone players, and still is. And I got to meet David,
Yeah.
which
I mean,
confuses people because I tell people I was the only lead alto player of Count Basie was influenced by David Sanborn. So
Yeah, I bet.
But
Yeah,
no, the vibrato I found once again when I listened to Marshall Royal records and I listened to the lead alto player Jerome Richardson of the Thad Jones Band, and then I listened to Johnny Hodges. I literally would just try to copy whatever they were doing orally. I found when I overthought the process, it wasn't working. And if it, because music is a language, and if we learn it like when our mother taught us to speak, we didn't write down or analyze how to talk. We just copied what mom and dad said. Basically, if you approach music like a child like that, it can come so much faster. I think it is our
yeah.
language.
And how do you know when you really got it? I mean, do you just listen to someone else's sound that you emulate, and you listen a ton, and then it comes out through your sound eventually, or do you have to record yourself and check? Okay, I'm getting closer. I'm getting closer. That kind of thing.
Good question. I used to record myself all the time, as a lot of musicians do. For instance, in the Lionel Hampton band, the lead trombone player Charles Stevens, he always had in those days. You remember the cassette recorder?
Of course.
He would set it
Oh,
under a stand and record every show. And I said to him, I said, Charles, why are you recording every show? He said, because I want to hear how I sound and what I'm playing. Because sometimes what you think is coming out of the horn is not what's coming out of the horn. And that was deep for me. I started recording myself in the band actually after that.
yeah, yeah. So that really does help. Yeah, I'm a big Johnny Hodges fan, by the way, as well. So, unbelievable player. Um, And like with that being said, so you have all this experience and you've learned the instrument so well, but how do you make a living doing music? How does that happen?
Nowadays, or a few years ago.
Is it harder nowadays?
It's definitely harder nowadays for a lot of
Mhm.
people. There's not as much work in New York. There's not as much work in Tokyo. There's not as much work worldwide. People think music is free now, and they
Yeah,
expect not to have to pay for it. Um, it a decline. There's an increase of great musicians and a decline in the amount of work. There's really not. For instance, jingles were quite big in New York, and my buddy Roger Byam, who played with Roberta Flack, and he was doing a lot of jingles at that time. But there's really no jingle industry or recording industry like that anymore. The big bands struggle to keep going. It's amazing that we keep the management that keeps the Count Basie band alive, because imagine the cost of the flights and the hotel rooms and to pay that band.
yeah. So how does one cut through? Given all that, how does one cut through nowadays?
You know, you want my honest
Yeah,
concept? Not it's very difficult to cut through nowadays, and not always are the greatest players making the most income, because it's become much more of a social media event, and it leaves a
yeah,
lot of people out. And we have some very great players, but what I find missing from the music is the swing, the dance, and the joy is missing a lot of time. What's focused on now is the notes and the technical ability of people. It's like I made a post about Mike Migliore making fun of faster, louder, higher. You know, most people like faster, louder, higher, but that might not be the best art. If you listen to Paul Desmond, it's a beautiful solo. Lee Konitz, Lester Young, Charlie Parker when he played Just Friends, that opening on Just Friends before the strings come in. It's
yeah.
gorgeous. It's perfect. I mean, so it doesn't have to be necessarily fast, loud, and higher, but right now, everything seems to be coming at us that way, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and you see that online too, and it's just like little snippets, right? 1 minute clips of crazy technique, but that's not necessarily reality or moving, correct? So,
It's
uh,
lost some of the audience, because someone made a joke about something I said about the other day. Not a joke, but a comment. A long time ago, I told people, when you play your solo, you should think about that girl standing at the back of the room and play for her. And what I meant was, like, if you listen to Johnny Hodges and Marshall Royal and all the great ballad players, and Charlie Parker too, he was playing beautifully, like he thought a woman would enjoy this playing, you know. And my brother told me a story once. He said, Marshall, if you go to the club and you play the kind of music, I don't know how to put this the right way. If you if you play music that say that the man brought his date in there, he's sitting with his wife or his girlfriend, and you start playing some music that makes his girlfriend uncomfortable, he's going to leave. And my brother not only played classical, he played rock and roll and some and jazz and gospel. And his point really hit me after I thought about it.
Mm. But you've had an impressive career. You played with several great groups and great musicians. How did you get these various jobs? I mean, was it word of mouth? Was it people you knew? Was it your playing ability alone, or is there some kind of networking involved?
Well, there was definitely networking. Since I came from Pittsburgh, I knew the first thing I came up to the East Coast of Connecticut, and my friend brought me up there, I immediately got a job in a top 40 band. People probably don't know I've played hundreds of top 40 gigs and learned the top 40. And my favorite player first was David Sanborn, and then Grover Washington. Those were my two. Probably before Charlie Parker. But no, I got in a top 40 band, and they had those bands. And remember, they have 100 weddings per year in Connecticut and stuff like that, or 80 weddings per year, and that's good money. So I was doing that. I learned a lot about the horn parts, how to transcribe horn parts and write them down from the pop tunes. Where was I going with this?
And then the networking, right? The
The
networking.
networking. So the
Yeah.
networking had to do with I got to Connecticut and I played, and a couple people said this guy's pretty good, and so they hired me in a top 40 band. So then I met other people in that band, and then you're playing for a lot of people, and then you met at the time you would meet other musicians in Connecticut. Eventually, I called my friend Leon Dorsey and said, I'm up here in Connecticut, and I really would like to see if I could get a job with the Lionel Hampton band. So, because I had been practicing a lot, and I thought, I think maybe I'm ready. And he actually called and gave me recommendations of the Lionel Hampton band. And actually, just before Christmas, Bill Titone called and said, "This is Marshall McDonald. I got your number from Leon Dorsey. We need a saxophone player." I said, "Oh, I'd love to do that. Thank you so much." And so we had the whole phone call, and then at the end of the phone call, said, "It's on baritone saxophone. That's good, right?" I said, and so of course I said, "Yo, yeah, that's good." I, I didn't have a baritone saxophone. Nathan Davis had me play one at Pitt, so I was thinking, well, if I could find one, I could play it again. And I literally went down to Rod Baltimore's, rented a baritone saxophone, and went to rehearsal with the baritone, and did well enough that they said, "You got the gig, you're on."
Yeah. So you got to say yes to gigs sometimes, even though you're not really quote ready. You just got to say yes and get ready, right? It's just one of those things.
Yes.
Yeah. And so and you really did have to hustle to get your career going. So you had to make phone calls. I mean, you didn't just sit and wait for people to call you, right?
Yeah, well, in those days remember we had the paper phone book where you collect people's numbers and stuff, and you didn't have any iPhone or anything back then. I would go sit in with people. I would try to get my own gigs. The weddings helped me meet other musicians. I met Baron Ramon. At one time he came in and sat in with Funkester. Baron played with Rod Stewart and a whole bunch of people in his life. A great saxophone player. I met him when he came to sit in, and you just start collecting people's names and numbers. When I got in the Lionel Hampton band, the first gig was 1990 New Year's Eve, and Nina Simone was the guest artist. So that I went from playing weddings to this big time gig, and it was really intense for me. But a funny story is, though, the band didn't tell me that the Lionel Hampton band, they go off the paper. Do you know what that means when you go off the paper and they just start playing riffs? That was the Lionel Hampton band was like an old Kansas City band, where a lot of it. The Sunday we're doing the New Year's Eve gig, and I'm thinking just going, and they suddenly the saxophones jumped up in their seats, right? They stood up and they start going like this, and they're playing all this stuff, and I'm looking at my music trying to find out where are they at, right. And they kind of laughed about it later. They said, "Oh man, we're just making up these riffs, man. You just got to follow along. You got to jump in and get in there."
That was your
But they
first
kind of
gig,
let
huh?
me kind of hang there for a few minutes.
The rookie treatment, right? So,
Right.
but yeah, but you really do got to pick up the phone and you got to call people, correct? I mean,
Yeah,
That's
you definitely have to network, and in New York, you go to rehearsals at the Union. I was going to rehearsals. I was playing in different big bands. I was meeting people after people. I was playing in the Sonny Costanzo big band at Quinnipiac College, and I got several gigs from doing that gig with Sonny Costanzo. That's actually how I got in the Basie band. Frank Foster was the guest artist one night, and I I had been working on giant steps. I decided it would be better for me to transcribe a lot of giant steps myself rather than read the transcription. So I don't know how many courses I did, maybe 12. I wrote out 12 courses of John Coltrane. And then I had the Walt Weiskopf book. And so I was practicing different giant step patterns pretty much for weeks. Ironically enough, when Frank got there, he called his chart giant steps, and I was playing tenor two, where it's like a he plays and then I play kind of thing. I play some courses, but it was odd that I was really ready. I've been doing this giant stuff for like 6 months, and my friend said, "Man, you sounded better than Frank on that tune, did, man." But Frank came up to him, he was like this, "Hey Mac, thanks for the lesson. Give me your phone number." So he literally called me because of that gig later and said he needed a sub in the Basie band, and that's how I got in 1994 subbing.
oh, okay. So you were just out there, and then you get calls that way, right? From people
I
seeing you.
also I met Poquito through that same band. Poquito was a guest artist, and he took my number and he hired me to play in the United Nation Orchestra. So
Amazing.
I think when you're on the scene playing, or go sit in with people, or you have to make yourself present. You can't be shy. You have to go down and ask someone can I sit in on a tune? You have to be ready for whatever you're going to do. I think you have to get out there and be active. You know.
Hmm. And is the hang part of it too? The after concert hang, is that necessary, or if you're in the scene and you're playing, is that enough? Do you really need, or do you need to make friends beyond that?
You definitely have to make friends. I honestly never was good at the hang because I wasn't a big drinker, and then at one point I stopped drinking altogether. At one time I was a big smoker though, but we won't get into that.
Uh,
But that was a different hang I had. But
uh,
it actually helped me play, to tell you the truth. I'll be honest with you, because if you get high, you kind of chill out, and I could practice for 4 hours straight.
mhm.
Just keep running the music. Um, the hang is definitely important. Some people are really good at the hang, like Doug Lawrence in the Basie band. Is a great tenor player, and he's still in the band. And he played with a lot of people, and he likes to drink a little. Maybe he's cut down now; he's gotten older. But if you like to drink, the hang is cool. If you're not a drinker, it's a little tricky, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah. I'm with you too. I'm not a drinker at all, really. So, yeah. But you got to. But the hang, it can go a long way, right? If you do it right. Yeah. And
Oh,
and in terms
you're
of
right.
tone, let me finish up with this. In terms of tone, has your tone remained consistent over the decades? Has it changed? And how does one change their tone if they're looking to change their tone?
Oh, you're freezing a little bit. Hold
Oh,
on.
I'm frozen. Am I frozen?
Yeah, it's probably on my end.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're not moving too much.
Oh, we'll give it a sec.
Okay,
Okay. Can you see me?
I can see you.
Okay. All right,
There you
great.
go.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a little rough on my end too on commute. I can hear you though, and you're moving, so it's just long distance
Yeah.
connection, I guess. That's how it goes. But okay, so in terms of tone, can one change their tone? How does one change their tone if they're looking to change your tone? And has your tone changed over the decades, or has it stayed pretty consistent?
Well, it definitely changed, especially when I was studying with Dave Tafani. It helped center my tone more. But most of the time, the way we hear sound, we're going to end up playing that sound we hear in our head. I think, whether it's an out of tune sound or an in tune sound,
Yeah.
I think the sound you garner is the sound you hear. But that doesn't mean you can't change and practice actual techniques to change your sound. Long tones, the overtone series on the saxophone, classical studies, I think, help more sometimes than trying to learn jazz. Um, so I think you can change your tone.
Is it possible to change what you hear in your head, how you hear yourself?
That's a good question. Is it possible to change how you hear yourself? I think it is. You have to you have to be honest with yourself and decide that this is what I want to sound like. And if you hear parts of your playing you don't like, you take those out and you keep the parts that you like.
Mm, yeah, fantastic. Well, Marshall, we'll let you go. I really appreciate your time. This has been extremely enlightening. We've learned a lot, so it's going to help a lot of people out there. And thanks for sharing your wisdom and lessons learned from your impressive career. Really, really appreciate your time.
I appreciate you having me, Nick. I really do. I could probably talk till tomorrow night.
You're doing great. You learned a lot so far, so thank you so much.